understanding of the situation and what is now being done. In taking this decision to make seafarers redundant, P&O have also today informed us they will be suspending services for approximately a week to 10 days while they locate new crew. The affected routes are Dover to Calais, Larne to Cairn Ryan, Dublin to Liverpool and Hull to Rotterdam. I know members right across the House, Mr Deputy Speaker, will share my concern over the loss of these routes. I should stress that P&O say they are only temporary and that alternative provision will be provided by other operators, to whom I am extremely grateful. Passengers will still be able to travel to and from the UK, including across the Channel, with freight coming in and out of the country. I understand that DFDS is stepping in to provide alternative services for passengers with valid tickets, and I would like to thank DFDS for their swift action. However, I must warn travellers that they should expect some disruption over the coming days. I have asked my officials to liaise with the Kent Resilience Forum and Cabinet Office to closely manage traffic in Kent over the coming days while P&O work to restore services. Today, the Dover tap has been activated, although as members will know, this is not all that uncommon. There is some queuing on Jubilee Way, although the Port of Dover expect this to reduce over the afternoon. I've also asked officials to remain in close contact with other resilience forums around the country, as well as the devolved administrations in managing this issue. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have of course long planned contingencies for situations, for disruption, particularly around the Channel, and I do not expect the supply of critical goods and services to be impacted as a result of this decision by P&O, although queues on the way to Dover are more likely to occur at times. Modelling suggests we have sufficient capacity to handle the temporary loss of these P&O ferries. Let me now turn to the issue of the seafarers, Mr Deputy Speaker. These are hard-working, dedicated staff who have given years in service to P&O. The way they have been treated today is wholly unacceptable, and my thoughts are first and foremost with them. Reports of workers being given zero notice and escorted off their ships with immediate effect, while being told cheaper alternatives would take up their roles, shows the insensitive way in which P&O have approached this issue, a point I have made crystal clear to P&O's management when I spoke to them earlier this afternoon. Good. As I told Peter Hebblethwaite, I am extremely concerned and frankly angry at the way workers have been treated today by P&O. As a matter of urgency, I've asked my department to liaise closely with counterparts in the Department for Work and Pensions to ensure that workers are being signposted to the most relevant support, and I am intending to call the trade unions immediately after this statement to discuss the situation with them. Mr Deputy Speaker, there can be no doubt that the pandemic has had a devastating impact on the finances of many travel companies, including P&O. But while their finances are matters for them and them alone to take, I would have expected far better for the workers involved. We will, of course, continue to engage closely over the coming days. I commend this statement to the House.
Louise Haigh.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The action taken by P&O Ferries today is a national scandal. It is a betrayal of the workers that have kept this country stocked throughout the pandemic. I've heard directly from the crew throughout the day. Their lives upended, the jobs they depended on scrapped. Workers are now left wondering how on earth they will put food on their family's table. And the management did not even have the decency to tell them face to face. They were told this life-changing news on a pre-recorded video. There are images circulating of what we are told are handcuff-trained security, some wearing balaclavas, marching British crew off their ships. This is not a corporate restructure. It's not the way we go about business in this country. It is beneath contempt, the action of thugs. It is quite simply a scandal that this Dubai-owned company, which received millions of pounds of taxpayers' money in the pandemic, without consultation and without notice, have upended the lives of 800 British workers, all while the profits of their owners, DP World, soared by 52% in the first half of 2021. We need a clear, unequivocal statement from the government. No ifs, no buts. An overseas conglomerate cannot be given free rein to sack workers in secure jobs here in Britain at the click of a button and replace them with agency staff. The government must not give the green light to this appalling practice and must act now to secure the livelihoods of these workers, not signpost them to the Department of Work and Pensions. Mr Deputy Speaker, this cannot stand. So will the Minister review any and every contract and licence the government has with P&O or DPW to maximise leverage and force them to do the right thing? DPW run 2 of the government's Freeport schemes. Will he look at terminating those contracts? Will he convene urgent talks with P&O and the unions to look immediately at what steps can be taken to safeguard these jobs? And can he confirm if the Secretary of State received notification as required under the 1992 Trade Union Act? Given neither the workers nor their unions received notification, this action is clearly illegal. So will he act immediately and ensure all those party to the decision are appropriately proceeded against? Will he join me in condemning Clyde Marine and Interserve in the role they have apparently played in today's events and investigate any action that can be taken against them? And will he outline the full extent to which other operators will be able to cover this unacceptable disruption? It is impossible to conceive that we have sufficient capacity to cover a loss of 10 days. Finally, will he look at clawing back every single penny of taxpayers' money given to P&O over the course of the pandemic? But, Mr Deputy Speaker, this must be set within a context. For far too long, this government has sat on their hands and chosen to side with bad bosses by failing to take action to outlaw fire and rehire. This is the cruel consequence of a decade of attacks on workers' rights. No more excuses. It's time for ministers to keep the promises they have made, deliver for workers' rights, and outlaw fire and rehire without delay. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are an island nation. British seafaring has been and is the envy of the world. We are rightly proud of the British sailors, ratings and officers who make our fleet and whose name is known across the globe. This is a straightforward assault on British seafaring. It cannot be allowed to stand. The government must stand up, speak out and take action for these proud workers to protect their livelihoods.
Yeah. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I thank the honourable member for her comments. She's quite right. Lives upended, jobs scrapped. My sympathy, my thoughts are wholly with those people who had this terrible news this morning. She's absolutely right. I've seen the video that she refers to. I agree. This is devastating news, and to have that played to you on a television screen rather than being told face-to-face is not what we expect the way loyal, hard-working workers should be treated. Likewise, crews being marched off, she mentions. I've heard the same reports. I expect people to be treated with dignity and respect at all times throughout their employment. There are, of course, employment laws that apply. Difficult for me at the moment to comment in any detail as to where that might be. I would urge anyone affected to consider legal advice. That's clearly something they should do. And difficult for me to comment on that, particularly as this is a fast-moving situation. She asks me to review contracts that may exist. I have asked my officials to do that. I can't give her any details at the moment. I apologise, but I will be able to provide information to the House in due course if required. Conversations around Freeports, of course, would have to take place across government, conversation with Treasury and the Department for Communities in particular. She asked me to convene urgent talks with the unions. I will speak to the unions this afternoon. In fact, maybe that's an initial conversation. There will be others, but I need no persuading that will happen. She's mentioned the illegality. Again, I ought not to go into this, but clearly there are a number of concerns the government has, and I would urge those to take the advice that they will need. She's asked me to give details of the operations. This is, of course, a fast-moving situation. Whilst I am assured that there is not likely to be an operations impact, I will be monitoring that closely. I can give her some more detail when I have it, and of course, if there is any steps to be taken, I would consider what those were. She's made contact about context. I, of course, reject any suggestion that we've sided with bad bosses. I've been absolutely clear this today and on other occasions about how I expect people to be treated with respect at all times, and I've been absolutely clear about that today. That is not the way people have been treated. No one should be treated in the way that they were today. And in terms of seafarers, we will continue to do everything we can to support British seafarers, and I hope to be able to speak to the House in more detail about that in due course.
Chair of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can I thank you for granting this statement, and can I thank the Minister for delivering it so robustly. P&O, this once great flag carrier of the seas, have made an appalling error. If they do not reverse immediately and reinstate the employees and follow proper process, it's hard to see a way back from them commercially. The parent DP World needs to understand that the British public will not do business with companies who treat their employees with such contempt. Can I ask that the government does everything within its power and influence, including tabling emergency legislation if needed, to ensure that this appalling employment transaction cannot be completed?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his comments. This is a fast-moving situation, and we are also reviewing the situation as it develops and as it exists. I will certainly be reviewing what arrangements exist as we go forward. I can certainly commit to working with all government departments to consider what relationships we have with P&O. I will review those. And I will also look to see whether there is anything I can do in the particular circumstances we are dealing with here, although, of course, commercial matters for a company are primarily a matter for them within the constraints of employment law, which, of course, in this country is high, and there are standards that we expect to be respected and upheld.
Chairman Newlands.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement, and can I also agree with every word that the Shadow Secretary and the Chair of the Select Committee has just said. I said earlier today that the actions of P&O were deeply concerning, but as more information has emerged, it's become clear those actions are shameful, insensitive and actually inhumane. The Government's response to the fire and rehire scandal was lip service, warm words saying fire and rehire is shameful, but stubbornly refusing to back those words up with any legislative action. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, though, that inaction has consequences. What P&O have done today in sacking 800 workers over Zoom without any notice or consultation and dragging them from their place of work using handcuff-trained private security personnel is well beyond even fire and rehire. Of course, our primary concern must be for the traumatised P&O staff and their families, now jobless, having gone to work like any other day. So will the Minister support those staff that remain aboard P&O vessels and call on P&O to end their attempts to forcibly remove staff? Of course, the villain in all of this is P&O and the parent company DP World, a company owned by anti-trade union oligarchs in Dubai who have a shockingly bad track record in employment relations. And P&O's plans to have entirely new cruise-operated vessels with zero or little acclimatisation period. Does the Minister not agree that P&O's aim to resume shipping with new staff almost immediately is reckless and unsafe? And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister was visiting the United Arab Emirates yesterday. Was there any discussion between the Prime Minister and the Dubai Government, the owners of DP World, on P&O? And lastly, and I mean it this time, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Minister said this is a commercial decision for them and them alone to take. I would have expected far better for the workers involved. I agree, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I would also expect far better protection for our workers from the government of the day. So can the Minister confirm if there's anything at all the government can do to intervene to help these workers? And if not, does that not highlight yet again just how broken UK employment law is? So
I entirely hear the anger and anguish that's been expressed by the honourable gentleman, and I know he speaks on behalf of probably constituents, certainly people that he represents, and I hear that. I would encourage all employees in any event to speak to their hard-working, loyal, long-serving employees. I would certainly urge them to engage with the unions, who I would have hoped would have been spoken to in advance in any event, in any such incidents that will cause distress to workers, and certainly in one such as this. I would urge them to do that. Safety matters. It's still an evolving situation, and clearly there are safety regulations that have to be applied and complied with in any case, no matter who's crewing a vessel, and I would expect that to be the case. Clearly there will be no shortcuts as far as safety is concerned. And we will continue to look across government and to speak to colleagues and uphold the rights that are clear in law to protect workers.
Natalie Elphick.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, my right honourable friend, will he agree with me that the way in which P&O Ferries and DP World have acted is shabby, disgraceful and utterly unacceptable? Yeah. They have mistreated 600 loyal workers in Dover. And in addition to this, they have brought traffic disruption and put at risk the economy and the trade routes through it. Yeah. Will he meet with me to discuss what more can be done to hold them to account, to hold DP World and P&O Ferries to account for their disgraceful behaviour?
Here. Well said, Natalie.
I thank the right honourable friend for that and for speaking out so powerfully and forcefully on behalf of her constituents who will be anguished, hurt and distraught at the news that they have been given today. She speaks for them, and I thank her for doing so. I will, of course, meet with her. I'll meet with any right honourable member from anywhere across the House to discuss any concerns that they or their constituents might have. She asks me, do I agree with that the way that P&O have behaved is unacceptable? Yes, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's unacceptable.
Rosie Duffield.
Mr Deputy Speaker, does the Minister acknowledge that my constituency of Canterbury and East Kent as a whole will be particularly affected by today's shocking news? What urgent support will the Government give to all those affected locally, including the hundreds of P&O workers treated disgracefully, as we've just heard, now facing no pay packet at all in the face of the soaring cost of living? They don't want a work coach, they just want their jobs back. Not to mention the beleaguered residents of East Kent who yet again will have to bear the brunt of serious disruption in our daily lives. And I'm glad to hear the Minister will meet with MPs across East Kent. That really needs to be urgently done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I thank the honourable member for the question that she's put and for, again, speaking out and making her constituents' understandable anguish so clear in this place. It's entirely heard by me, and I share it. She speaks with anger. I've expressed that anger in person to P&O today because of the effect this will be having on people living in her constituency and elsewhere at the news that they have had, particularly at this time, which is in any event, is a time that is causing much uncertainty for many people. I'd be delighted to meet with her and any others who would like to meet with me to discuss what we may be able to do. I referred earlier in my statement to some signposting within DWP. That is some support that is available. If there are other things that would be helpful, I'm very happy to hear from her. And she lastly referred to disruption. There may be some disruption. The only happy side of things is that we have some good, well-rehearsed procedures in place to deal with that disruption. I totally accept that they will cause her inconvenience to her constituents, but I hope that the well-practiced routines we have in place will keep that to a minimum.
Sir John Hayes.
Mr Deputy Speaker, as Shipping Minister, I oversaw the Maritime Growth Study to build on the success of the sector, the heart of which was the development of skills to build an even stronger merchant navy. This capricious, careless, callous decision by P&O flies in the face of all of that. So will my honourable friend work with my old friends in the maritime sector of the RMT and others to recover any monies granted to P&O during the pandemic, to ensure they reverse this decision? And don't let anyone tell me this is the free market. The free market put little girls in factories and Boysdown mines, and both at risk on the high seas. We thought those dark days are gone. P&O are either too dim to see that or too dastardly to know it.
My right honourable friend's absolutely right about the skills that have been demonstrated by extraordinary British seafarers over the course of many years. This is something that is key to the government's vision of what it wants to achieve. It's something that's particularly important to me personally. We remain committed to doing what we can to support seafarers, and all the strategies that the Honourable House has heard me talk about before through Maritime 2050 and onwards remain the case. That focus on maritime skills remains the case. The government is still determined to do all it can to grow British seafarers and to make this and to continue this to be a maritime nation as it's always been. That, my right honourable friend, can be assured remains undimmed. He also speaks quite rightly about employment rights. They are extensive in this country. They're there for a good reason. They continue. Government supports them.
Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As the MP for Liverpool Riverside, I'm disgusted by the actions of P&O today. Liverpool is one of the routes that are going to be affected by this action. And it's another example of fire and rehire by a despicable employer. But while this government has stood by and ignored it, actions speak louder than words, Minister. So let's take some decisive action against P&O. Thank you.
Again, I understand the honourable member's anger on behalf of her constituents entirely. I know they will be affected. I'm acutely aware of that. We don't know all the circumstances yet. I ought to just caution her as to whether this is a fire and hire risk situation or some other situation. What I absolutely am clear about, in any event, the honourable member says, happy to repeat it for her, they have fired 800 staff. She's right, and I've been absolutely clear about my view of the way in which this has been done. I'm merely making a point about the contractual arrangements that exist. We need to understand that. I will continue to work with her and others to see what we can do to help.
Gibson.
I thank my honourable friend for coming to the House so swiftly today. We are all shocked, outraged and appalled at the treatment of P&O staff today, and I welcome the Minister's condemnation of these dreadful employment practices. Will he continue to update the House on this unfolding situation?
Yes, I'm acutely conscious, Mr Deputy Speaker, that there are some details I haven't been able to give today because the situation is evolving and there are some things yet that we don't know and I don't know. As and when I do know, of course I will give the information that is required, be that verbally or in some other way.
Then Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I want to speak on behalf of my honourable friends for Hull East and Hull West and Hessel and the people of Hull who stand tonight united in our utter disgust at what has happened to the seafarers that we're discussing that have been sacked by P&O. And it's simply a lie that P&O must sack 800 British workers to survive. P&O last year paid out £270 million to shareholders whilst taking furlong money from taxpayers. And the government has to be really clear here about who they back. And they cannot just say this is a commercial decision. This is a choice between predatory employers sacking workers on Zoom in their levelling down race to the bottom, or our loyal, hard-working UK workers fighting for their jobs. So will the Minister tell the House that he will instruct Dubai-based DP World to stand down the replacement crews, to send the security muscle home, and to reinstate those who've been sacked immediately?
I thank the Honourable Lady for speaking on behalf of Hull and her right honourable friends to make their voices heard today. I am absolutely clear, and her question of itself shows the importance of the maritime sector to the entirety of our United Kingdom, because from every corner of our United Kingdom today there are honourable and right honourable members expressing their anguish on behalf of their constituents and their own feelings, of course, as well. And she's quite right, of course, that the furlough money would have been available to P&O, so the government has supported this company as it supported the whole of the economy during the pandemic. She says, are we on the side of a levelling down race to the bottom? No, we're not. I've been absolutely clear today. There are rights. We expect them to be maintained and supported. And she says, are we on the side of those hard-working workers? Yes, we absolutely are.
Peter Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Deputy. My background is in the
Maritime Minister Robert Courts there speaking to the House of Commons after P&O Ferries made 800 staff redundant with immediate effect and also cancelled all of their ferries as well. So Mr Courts there saying no one should be treated this way, saying the government is fully behind the workers. He did say procedures are in place to help those affected, the passengers affected, with other companies stepping in. Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to Sky's Ivor Bennett, who's in Dover for us. But first, let's go to our political correspondent, Joe Pike. And Joe, Mr Courts saying that he shared the anger of MPs, it expressed that anger to P&O today. Is there much that ministers can actually do?
We didn't really detail a huge amount of support the government could give, did he, Robert Courts, the Maritime Minister? He said they could signpost people to help from the Department for Work and Pensions, but also, perhaps significantly, he said that he had instructed his civil servants, his officials, to review any contract the government does have with P&O. And P&O, of course, is a company that deals with passengers as well as freight. But it's hard to think if that company had really predicted such a united and angry response from the House of Commons that they had expected to be so roundly condemned by parliamentarians, not for what they have done, but for how they have done it. Clearly, they are in a difficult situation, arguing they need to be more competitive and efficient. They have this £100 million black hole. Cumulatively, over the last 3 years, they've lost about £250 million. The pandemic has clearly not helped. Perhaps the Northern Ireland Protocol has added some impediments too, but quite how this has happened, pretty brutally, people being told without any consultation that it is over and you are out, clearly has gone down very, very badly, not just with the UK government, but also with the Scottish government too. Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, presumably very worried about employees on the route between Kenryan, of course, in the south west of Scotland, what was Stranraer, close by, that route from Kenryan to Larne. She has spoken to the CEO of P&O, and she's tweeted this about her conversation. I have just spoken directly to the CEO of P&O and made clear my utter disgust at this appalling treatment of its workers. I made clear that the Scottish Government stands with these workers and will do everything possible to ensure fair treatment for them. But as you point out, Sophie, how powerless are the government? Is there much they can do? We heard from one Conservative Select Committee chair, Hugh Merriman, who said that effectively P&O should reverse their decision. It was an appalling error, and it's hard to see a way back for the company unless they reverse that decision. Is that likely? I'm unsure. We haven't heard much from the company since their original statement, but certainly I think with that widespread condemnation from all sides of the House, this seems at this stage a PR disaster for the ferry company.
It does, doesn't it, Joe? Thank you very much for that. Let's go now to Ivor Bennett, shall we, who's in Dover for us. And Ivor, what is the situation where you are?
So I'm stood outside the cruise terminal, actually, of the Port of Dover, because behind these gates are the 3 P&O ferries that have been moored up here stationary since this morning when the company suspended all sailings. We understand that there are actually still some P&O staff who have been made redundant still on board. The RMT union, we know, has been advising its members not to leave the ships in protest at this mass redundancies, these mass layoffs. But in this case, we understand that actually the staff, it's not a case of them refusing to leave, it's actually they're just waiting to be able to leave, gathering all their stuff and then being let out gradually. And we know that because I've spoken to 2 P&O staff who have just walked out these gates. They didn't want to speak on camera because of non-disclosure agreements they've signed in their contracts that might prevent them getting any redundancy payouts. But they did tell me that they've been working for the company, in one case 6 years, in another case 25 years. And they found out they lost their jobs this morning at about 11 o'clock via Zoom in a meeting that lasted, or announcement that lasted around 3 minutes, all very abrupt. They had no prior warning, and they've basically been left high and dry. And as I said, some of their colleagues are still on board, waiting to be let off. Now, unions are, of course, furious about this, calling it a betrayal of British workers, nothing short of scandalous, because these the 800 who have been laid off, which are right from the top, captains all the way down to, say, check-in staff, cleaners, loaders, engine room engineers as well. They're going to be replaced by foreign agency workers, and a few minibuses have gradually been going in here to go and board the ferries, and I spoke to a few of them. They've flown in from Latvia, Romania and Georgia, and they all said they flew in this morning, having signed temporary contracts last night. So it's all been very hastily arranged, and a huge impact obviously for those who have been laid off, but also impacts for passengers too. The company is warning of significant disruption ahead, with all sailing suspended for the next few days. Today, though, what we've seen at the port of Dover, where the ferries leave in that direction, there hasn't actually been much disruption at all that we've seen, because whilst there has been a line of lorries, that's actually quite normal for this time of day, this time of the week, according to the officials here. Anyone who does have a ticket for a P&O crossing, they're actually being redirected and rebooked on other carriers, and that operation seems to have worked quite smoothly. But as I say, the company P&O is warning of significant disruption ahead for any passengers booked, and of course significant disruption for the lives of all those 800 staff who have been laid off.
Thank you.
Well, good evening from Lviv in western Ukraine. It is day 22 of Russia's invasion, a campaign which, according to Western intelligence, has stalled on virtually all fronts. But still, the Ukrainian people paid the price for Russia's aggression. In Mariupol, a rescue effort is underway after the bombing of a theatre where more than 1,000 people were thought to be taking shelter. That